One of the things that I love the most about college football is the fact that 1 week, one week can change the dynamic of a lot of different things. And what I mean by that is in 1 week, Alabama fans are calling for Kalen DeBoer's head. In 1 week, Florida State fans and Florida State players are thinking they're world beaters all of a sudden. It's just to me, college football is so fun. And, to clarify a few of those points, I'd like to say, I know I mentioned it on the podcast earlier in the week, how impressed I was with Florida State last Saturday. But I've caught some grief and I've caught some flack for me saying that I don't think they're a top 10 team. And they're not. But the good news is, guys, listen, we don't have to take it personal. We don't have to get mad about it. But the thing about it is this. It's 1 week. It's one game. You still have plenty of opportunities to prove that you are who you say you are. And if you believe that Florida State's the best team in the country, you believe you're a top 5 team, your team's got plenty of opportunities going forward to prove it. So, with that being said, if you're upset that you're ranked, 14th, or if you're another team that you're upset with your ranking, here's the thing. Rankings don't matter this time of year. We're 1 week into the college football season, okay? Rankings don't matter. Even me, everybody knows I'm a Georgia fan. I don't care that we're ranked 4th. That doesn't matter. What matters is, are we ranked 4th at the end of the season after championship week? That's what matters. Making it into that 12-team playoff after championship week and, being there when all the dust settles. That's the point. But to dive into a little bit of Alabama's problem, and, man, I've seen... I can't say a whole lot about Alabama fans because Georgia fans, and from me looking at it through a Georgia fan lens, we can get just as bad at times of eating our own, so to speak. And I have seen some absolutely wild things on social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you have. I've seen it this week as far as Alabama fans just going ballistic. And rightfully so, because here's the thing. Alabama's lost 4 games in their last 9 games, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, audience, but I believe it's to unranked opponents. So I believe they've lost 4 of their last 8 games. Definitely not Alabama-esque. And I know I talked earlier in the week. We haven't seen an Alabama team you don't get to see an Alabama team get dominated in the trenches as often as we saw, or like we saw on Saturday with Florida State. And so I feel like for Bama, it's back to the drawing board. But everything that we've seen this week, fire DeBoer, get rid of him, well, got news for y'all. The guy's buyout $70 million. So that may not be a realistic possibility. I mean, that's a big sum of money. I mean, Jimbo Fisher's buyout was ridiculous at A&M. Was it $75 million, I believe it was, when he got bought out by A&M. A&M's got that kind of money. I don't know if Alabama's got that kind of money. Plus, it will set you back financially. I just don't know. And you want to be like, hey, give the guy a chance. But here's the thing. That job, regardless of who took it, that job was, you were setting up to measure up against the greatest college football coach of all time. It was a no-win situation for whoever took the job. Heck, Kirby Smart could have taken the job, and he would have been measured up against Nick Saban. When you're measuring up your coach against Nick Saban, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, do I think that Bama losing over the last, season and a half or, over the last season really in one game, is it really like Bama to lose 4 games to unranked competition? No, that is definitely not the standard that has been laid out and set in Tuscaloosa. But here's the thing. I feel like with the recruits that have been coming into the University of Alabama, it's taking Kalen DeBoer some time to settle in. I don't think that Kalen DeBoer is going to run the program into the ground. You listen to a lot of these talk shows, you listen to a lot of guys like Paul Feinbaum where people call in, oh man, if you ever want to just sit back and feel better about yourself, tune into Paul Feinbaum and just listen to some of the people that call in. Like the fact that their world just shatters when their team loses a college football game. It's quite funny. It's quite, it's mesmerizing to me. Georgia can lose a game. Of course I'm upset because Georgia loses, but it's not the end of the world for me. I know there's always another game. So it's been a whirlwind week so far. A lot of talking points, a lot of things have been brought up about, Kalen DeBoer and everything else. So conveniently, this episode, we will not really have a whole lot to talk about because of the fact that, there's really not a lot of marquee matchups this upcoming weekend. It wasn't like week one where we just got slapped in the face at noon on Saturday with a top 4 matchup. It was, this weekend you've got the premier game being Oklahoma and Michigan. You also have Oklahoma State and Oregon, which do I think it will be interesting? Not really. You have Ole Miss, Kentucky, which is an interesting storyline there because of the fact that Kentucky beat Ole Miss last year. So we will dive into that one. Also, we have another storyline developing kind of a little bit. I guess you could say Iowa and Iowa State. Iowa State off to a 2-0 start. Are they for real? Well, we're going to find out, and they're going to have a really good test on Saturday against Iowa. But we'll jump into those matchups here in just a minute. A couple things I want to talk about. Let's talk about the new AP poll. One segment I want to do on this episode is I want to talk about the new AP poll, go through 25-1, counting down who I think's too high and who I think is too low and who I think is just right. So let's go into the AP poll. Let's pull it up on the screen here. We're currently waiting. All right. So here we go. So in 25th, we have Utah. Very impressive win that they had last week. So we will not, we're not going to really dive too deep into Utah, but nevertheless, great win for them. Moving on, 24, we will go to Texas Tech. We have Texas Tech at 24. I feel like Texas Tech still has a lot to prove. Spent a lot of money in the offseason on NIL. Still have some things that, some wrinkles that they need to iron out. I think they're just right. Also, likewise, I think Utah is just right. Indiana at 23. Really kind of Indiana really just, with Old Dominion last week, very underwhelming performance, 27-14 the final score on that one, and it took a while for Indiana to kind of really get their bearings. I mean, this game was 17-7 at halftime, 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. Took them a minute to kind of get their bearings about, but ultimately pulled away 13-point victory. Still don't know what to think about Indiana at the moment. Tennessee at 22. Tennessee, a lot of question marks, myself included. I know I mentioned that going into the game against Syracuse in week 1, I said that Tennessee didn't know, big question mark, who's the quarterback, what's the quarterback situation going to look like, and Joey Aguilar delivered. He looked great, and the contrast, if you just want to go watch the UCLA game. I, for one, did not, because I would. There's a lot of things I would rather do on that particular night than watch subpar quarterback play. So I did not watch Nico Amaliava's premier, whatever game with UCLA. I didn't watch him play. So ultimately, but you look at his stat line, it was about very Nico-esque, So take that however you want. But Tennessee at 22, I feel like is kind of a situation where I feel like they could be a little higher. I really was impressed by the way that they moved the ball. The offense seemed to be clicking. Josh Heupel just could really be one of the best minds as it pertains to offense in all of college football. Just a lot of misdirection. You saw a lot of Syracuse was just very confused from the jump. Just a lot of wide open guys downfield. Just Tennessee was rolling. And for that, I would say, Tennessee at 22. I honestly feel like they may, could be a little higher, and I wouldn't be upset for it. So Alabama drops back to 21, and I know we've talked about Alabama in depth here, over the last 2 episodes, but Alabama's got some things to figure out. One, an Alabama football team, the Alabama football team we saw Saturday is not characteristic of the Alabama football teams we've seen in the past. The inability to run the football and the inability to stop the run is what Alabama's really prided themselves on, especially since they've been on their run of dominance. We didn't see that Saturday. So, like I said earlier, back to the drawing board for Alabama. At 21, I feel like that's a good spot for them because there's still room for them to grow. There's still room for them to prove that they still belong in that playoff conversation. Right now, I don't have them in that conversation just based off of the performance that they had on Saturday. I just don't think – I watched them Saturday. I saw an 8-4 team. I'm just going to be honest with you. If they can't iron out those wrinkles and they cannot fix and address those problems and the issues that they were having Saturday with A, stopping the run, and B, running the football, it's going to be a long season in Tuscaloosa, and you're looking at another 8-4 campaign in year 2 of Kalen DeBoer, which is not going to bode well for him at all. At the 20th spot, we have Ole Miss, and Austin Simmons comes out, the lefty. Georgia fans, we remember him all too well from last year in Oxford, in which we got beat there in Oxford last year by, Jackson Dart goes out with a little bit of injury. Austin Simmons comes in, offense clicks, from the jump. They come in, they look great. However, I will say Austin Simmons a little careless with the football in this past weekend's contest. 2 interceptions. Really needs to make better decisions throwing the football. I feel like he's a great quarterback. I feel like he's going to get there with a little bit more growth and maturity in the offense. Ole Miss is going to continue to improve, I feel, and as always, with Lane Kiffin calling the plays, they're going to be a tough out because they're going to be tough to stop. 19, Texas A&M. Still a lot of questions around Texas A&M. Marcel Reed looked great at times last year, and at times he didn't look good. So which version of Marcel Reed are you going to get from week to week? I feel like A&M's got a big matchup coming up. They got a bye week this upcoming Saturday. The following Saturday, they have Notre Dame, and that's when we are going to find out what we're getting with Texas A&M. And I can't wait for that football game. I feel like it's going to be a real, as we like to say, real slobber knocker of a football game. It's in South Bend. Currently, the line is Notre Dame by 6.5. So if you're into getting into some of that action early, a couple weeks out, go ahead and get in because I really am not crazy about that line. I think the game's going to be a lot tighter than that. So just a little nugget of wisdom, for when you're making your picks or when you're making any kind of, bets on that football game. 18, we have Oklahoma. Big upgrade at quarterback, in my opinion, going from Jackson Arnold last year to John Mateer this year. John Mateer is a lot more polished of a passer, seen a lot of football, very smart, good, cerebral kid. We're going to find out, and we'll cover this game, and we'll talk about this game in more, we'll talk about this game more in detail here in just a little bit with Michigan and Oklahoma playing this weekend. Oklahoma currently 5.5 point. Oklahoma currently 5.5 point favorite. But here's the big thing about, with John Mateer. 392 yards, 3 touchdowns, 30 of 37 passing in his debut with the Oklahoma Sooners. Mateer's just going to be one of those guys that I feel like is going to be able to stretch the field along with Keontez Lewis. They already seem to have a really good connection and really good chemistry between the two of them. And that's a dangerous thing. I mean, Keontez Lewis, I believe, caught 9 passes, 119, 120 yards this past weekend. So already with a very good rapport built with his quarterback, and I feel like that could be a problem. Also, Bryce Underwood's definitely not getting the credit that he deserves either. Michigan in their opening game obviously didn't need him to be Superman. Against New Mexico, they win 34-17. He throws for 250. But Bryce Underwood is what everyone is telling you that Arch Manning is. And if you don't believe me, just go watch the tape. The kid is special. Everybody says that Arch Manning being a generational talent, they just completely skip right over Bryce Underwood. And I don't know if it's because of an SEC thing, like people want Arch to be, on the mountaintop because he's an SEC quarterback. But Bryce Underwood legit is as every bit of good as advertised. I mean, every bit as good as advertised. And we heard about it all off season with the commitment, with him flipping from LSU to Michigan at the last minute. But, he is everything, like I said, that the media is telling you Arch Manning is, and nobody's really talking about him. So, next we have SMU. Last year I wasn't too crazy about them. I'm not too crazy about them this year either. I feel like they may be a few spots too high. I don't have a whole lot to say about them other than the fact that I need to see some more substance before I can really make an accurate assessment on where I think they need to be. Iowa State at 16, honestly, I think they could be a little bit higher after their 2 wins that they've had to open the season. They look like they're on a roll, and we'll see. They have a contest with Iowa coming up this weekend, which we'll talk about more in a minute, that'll really kind of tell us where they're at. But for right now, I think they're fine where they're at. Michigan at 15, another team, I think they're fine where they're at as well. They still have a lot to prove. Bryce Underwood's only going to continue to grow in that role. Justice Haynes going to continue to run the rock for Michigan. I feel like they're back to that style football team that won the national championship a couple years ago. Whether or not you believe the national championship was legit or not is beside the point, but Michigan is still a really good football team this year, sign stealing aside, because I don't think they're doing it anymore this year. Or are they? But anyway, Bryce Underwood is a guy to keep an eye on. As a freshman, he's got poise, he's got great arm talent, got great pocket presence, escapability, you name it. He's a total package. Maybe that's why I thought of Bryce Young. I don't know, but they got a lot of similar traits, but he's a lot bigger than Bryce Young. That's the biggest thing. He's a lot more of a physical specimen than Bryce Young was, but with all the traits that made Bryce Young great. Florida State at 14, and I know I've caught some flack for this over the last few days, or the last couple days talking about Florida State. I think they're fine where they're at, and here's why. Because if you really look at the teams in front of them, there's 12 teams in front of them, and that you can go and do the research yourself. There's 12 teams in front of Florida State that would be favored to win on a neutral field. You go and look in the system based off of FPI. Florida would be favored on a neutral field. South Carolina would be favored on a neutral field. Notre Dame, Texas, Clemson, Oregon, Miami, Georgia, LSU, Penn State, and Ohio State all would be favored on a neutral field against Florida State. I feel like they're fine where they're at. I don't feel like that of the top 10 teams, I don't feel like Florida State's better than any of those teams at this very moment. Now, lean in close, Florida State fans, because I want you to understand something. This is not me hating your football team. This is not me attacking your football team. This is me just saying that I need to see more from your football team. Because here's the thing, and look at it from this perspective. The AP voters, a team that's unranked to start the season beats a team that finished 8-4 and has lost 4 of their last 8 football games. That team finished 2-10 last season. How much faith do you have in that football team? You get where I'm going with this? You finished 2-10 last year. You just beat a team that was preseason ranked in the top 10. You beat them by 2 scores. Yes, it is Alabama, but at some point the name recognition has to be cast aside. Yes, you beat Alabama, but it's also the same football team that went 8-4 last year and has lost 4 of their last 8. So when we really dive into that aspect of it, I feel like Florida State's in the driver's seat where they're at. Because here's the thing. You still have some tough games coming up. You still have to play Miami. You still have to play Clemson. You still have some really good games, and it gives you plenty of opportunity to prove that you belong in that discussion, in that top 5, top 10, whatever, wherever you think that Florida State needs to be ranked. Florida State fans, if you think you're the best team in the country, you've got plenty of time and opportunity to prove it. We're only 1 week into this college football season. So plenty of time to prove it. 13, Florida. And this is a team that I feel like, honestly, I would probably swap spaces with Illinois at 11 with Florida, because I feel like from what I've seen so far with Florida, yeah, they were playing Long Island, but DJ Lagway is a really good quarterback. I mean, we could be talking about at the end of the season, we could be talking about how he's the best quarterback in the SEC. We could be. He stays healthy. He's a great thrower of the football. He also has good feet in the pocket, good pocket presence. He generally makes good decisions. And, just I feel like as long as he stays healthy, Florida will go where DJ Lagway goes. He just has to stay healthy. Last year, they got rolling there for a minute. The train went off the tracks. He got hurt, and then we're back, to playing backups and this and that. And Florida lost all that momentum that they had gained in a couple games last year. So Florida, I feel like, is a little bit too low. They may be a couple spots too low. And they're still another team to me that I feel like they have a lot to prove. Opening the season with Long Island, didn't really learn a lot. So moving right on to Arizona State at 12, I feel like they're a little bit too high, to be honest with you. But for right now, we'll keep them. Illinois at 11. Illinois, just to me, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I look at the roster. I look at Luke Altmaier, who very vanilla quarterback, not really a guy that really sticks out on paper, not going to go out and make the superhuman type plays. He's just been around a long time. And I just don't understand why we're giving Illinois this much credit. I feel like they're way too high at 11. I feel like Illinois' 18, 19 range, I feel like they're 6 or 7 spots too high, because I really don't see Illinois being in any kind of discussion here come the end of the year as far as being in a playoff or anything like that. I mean, they got Duke this weekend. They're an 11th ranked team. They're going to play Duke on the road, and they're only favored by 2.5. So that'll tell you that that'll tell you that not a lot of people have a lot of faith in Illinois either. Wouldn't shock me at all if they lose that game this weekend as well. At 10, we got South Carolina. South Carolina, they're just where they need to be. Lenore Sellers is only going to continue to get better. Really good-looking football team. Very physical, really good on defense. Dylan Stewart is still a freak coming off the edge. Lenore Sellers is still going to be that guy that could be, like I said about Lagway, Lenore Sellers could be the best quarterback in the SEC when it's all said and done in the season. But that remains to be seen. Still a great roster that Shane Beamer's put together. We'll see if he can finally break through. There's always been that. There's always some hype surrounding South Carolina first few games into the year, and then about the halfway point in the season, maybe as they start to, come down the hill on the other side on the latter half of the season, there's always a slip up somewhere. So see if South Carolina can avoid that slip up. They've got a generally favorable schedule this year, not so much I wouldn't say it's a very favorable schedule, but ultimately they still have some pretty tough matchups coming forward. They got South Carolina State this weekend, and then they move on from South Carolina State. They play Vanderbilt at home. They play Missouri on the road. They play Kentucky at home. Then they go to Death Valley on October 11th. So that'll be a big game. They've actually got 4, as it stands right now, they've got 5 ranked matchups in a row as it stands right now, where they have LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. That's going to be a very tough stretch because they're going to have to go on the road to LSU, then go on the road to Ole Miss, on the road to A&M. So tough stretch for South Carolina there. But we'll find out a lot about that team. I'm not going to dive into them too much. I know I've been really bullish. I've been really high on South Carolina. Not going to dive into that too much. We'll find out what South Carolina's made out of. Notre Dame drops back after the loss to Miami. They drop back to number 9. A lot of question marks around this football team. Definitely not as good of a football team as they were last year. 9, I feel like, is fair. I feel like maybe if you wanted to drop them back another spot or two, wouldn't be that big of a deal. But that's about right for me at number 9. 8, Clemson. After their loss to LSU, in a game that I feel like I still like Clemson. I just feel like they've got to show me a lot, along with a lot of people that I've talked to about them. I feel like we need to see a lot from them. We need to see some more. We need to see more from Cade Klubnik. We definitely need to see them run the football better, because that rushing performance that they had this past weekend was gross. Definitely need to take a load off of Cade Klubnik by running the football better. And that's probably one of the biggest things that Dabo's addressing in practice this week is, hey, guys, we've got to run the football better. Because like I said earlier in the week on the other episode this week that I recorded, Cade Klubnik is not a high-volume passer guy. If you're relying on Cade Klubnik to throw 40 or 50 balls a game, you're not setting yourself up for that's not a winning recipe. You're setting yourself up for failure because he's not a high-volume type quarterback. He's at his best when you can run the football for 150 to 200 yards, run play action, and he can maybe have anywhere from 20 to 26 throws a game. That's where he's at his best. And that's where Clemson needs to do is just play to his strengths. They don't need to try to go out there and feature him or anything like that and throw 40, 50 times because that's not going to bode well for them in the long run. Texas drops back to 7th after the loss to Ohio State. I feel like they still have one of the best rosters in college football, if anything, on the defensive side of the ball with Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill Jr. They just have a very ferocious unit on that side of the football. Arch Manning's just going to continue to grow. He's going to be fine, Texas fans. Put the knife down. He's going to be okay. Trust me. He's going to be fine. I don't feel like Texas is in a panic mode. I don't feel like there needs to be any panic in Austin. I don't even feel like we need to be talking about making a quarterback change or anything like that. I think he's going to be just fine. Just calm down, let the kid settle in. It's really and truly his first year as the full-time starter. A lot of pressure on him. He's going to settle into that role. He's going to do nothing but get better and improve from here on out. So relax. Oregon, another team we got to see some more from. We always know that Oregon's going to have the athletes with the NIL, with Nike money that they're spending to get these athletes in the door at Oregon. Everybody wants to go play for, a team that has a million different uniform combos and 0 national championships. Everybody wants to. I've always thought it was cool that Oregon wears the number of national championships that they've worn on the side of their helmet. I've always thought that's really cool. But kids want to go play there for the NIL, and I understand that. A lot of money. We just have to see more from Oregon, as far as, what are they looking like? We just have to see them play stiffer competition, and that's where we're at. Miami goes to 5th. Miami, I feel like it's a good spot for them. Carson Beck, which I think we talked enough about him earlier in the week. Miami biggest thing, great offensive line unit. Somebody challenged me to say something positive about Miami on today's episode. So, Miami, great offensive line unit, and also Reuben Bain, ferocious, just a monster. So Miami's going to be good because they're good in the trenches. And so moving on, 4, we have Georgia. Georgia plays Marshall, wins 45-7. Saw a lot of good things as a Georgia fan. I don't want to come on this podcast and appear biased and be like, oh, that's the best team in college football. Georgia looked good. We're still going to need to see. They got Austin Peay this weekend, and then we will find out when they go to Neyland Stadium here in a few weeks. We will find out exactly what Georgia's working with, but definitely some things to be encouraged about. If you watch them Saturday, Dwight Phillips Jr. is an absolute burner. Guy runs a 4.28 official 40-yard dash. Just great at the running back position for a little change of pace back. And then also big receivers on the outside. Zachariah Branch, proves to be the prize transfer that everybody was going after him. He proves to be as good as advertised. Number 3, LSU. Far and away could make an argument that's the best team in college football. However, I won't. I've heard people, Heather Dinich, say that LSU is the best team in college football. They are not. I'm not going to put – now, I would say LSU could be second, and I will say that because I'm not a believer in Penn State. Yes, I know Drew Aller's back. I know Penn State's got a very senior-led roster, and they have a lot of, they've seen a lot of snaps between the guys that play on that football team. I understand it. To me, if LSU and Penn State lined up this weekend, I'd put everything I got on LSU. That's just the way I feel about it. Penn State at number 2, we've got to see some stuff from them. They don't really start the season with a quality opponent like a lot of teams don't, and understandably so. A lot of teams don't start the year with a quality opponent. They start off kind of slow. Penn State plays FIU this upcoming Saturday, so we're still not going to see anything from Penn State really until Oregon comes to town on September 27th. And that will be the game where we will find out what Penn State's made out of. And, I can't wait to talk about that one, because that's going to be a real tell for both of these teams, for Oregon and for Penn State. We're going to find out what these teams are made out of there. All right. So AP poll, 25-1. I know I'm going to get some people that are going to be upset with me about it and say, oh, man, I feel like, this one's wrong, this is wrong. That's fine. Go get your own show and you can state your opinions. Iowa State, let's talk about the games this weekend. Let's talk about where my head's at. Let's talk about my picks, what I'm thinking. Iowa State comes into this game off of 2 wins, one in Ireland against Kansas State, and then another one, they had South Dakota, which they put up 55 points last Saturday. So now we move into Iowa State, and we move into getting to really see what this Cyclones squad is really made out of. And, I really like Rocco Becht. I like him as a quarterback. He makes good decisions. I think that Iowa State has a good roster this year. Brett Eskildson and Rocco Becht have formed kind of like I said, they've got a lot of rapport together. They've got a good connection. Hansen running the rock very well. The thing about Iowa is Iowa's going to try, and Iowa's notorious for shortening football games. And I know it absolutely shocked me that Iowa scored 34 points last Saturday. I couldn't believe that Iowa scored over 30 points. It's been a long time since we've seen that. So Iowa coming into this game, they're going to want to run the rock, and they're going to want to slow the game. They're going to really come in here to run the rock with Xavier Williams. That's the guy on the year so far, 11 carries, 122 yards, and a touchdown. Just really ran the football well last weekend. That's going to be the workhorse as far as how they're going to attack this Iowa State defense, is Xavier Williams. That's the big key here, is going to be, can Iowa run the football? If Iowa can run the football and they can shorten this game somewhat and have the time of possession advantage, I feel like it could be a little bit, it could be a pretty tight football game, given the nature of how they like to play football. Iowa State currently favored by 3.5, but I'm going to say, give me Iowa State, and give me Iowa State to cover, because I love Rocco Becht. I like Hansen. I love Eskildson. I like them to get it done, and I like for them to be just a little bit too explosive for Iowa to keep pace with, I think is where we're going to be at with that one. Oklahoma State, Oregon will make this one pretty short and sweet. 29.5, Oregon's favor on the spread. This one's on Saturday at 3:30. Oklahoma State, really, I really don't see them having anything for Oregon. However, 29.5 points is a big number to cover. This one's tough. I've got it written down right here on my notes. I had to think about this one a pretty good bit earlier. Had to come to somewhat almost like a coin flip, because it's just a toss-up for me, because I know how explosive Oregon can be. I know how fast they can put up points. I understand all of that. 29.5 points, though, is a very big number to cover. So I'm going to say I think Oregon wins this football game. I think they win it by about 20 points. I don't have them covering in this football game. I have them winning by, say, 20, 21 points, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it could even be 41-20. But I just don't have them covering. I don't. That's a big number to cover, is all I'm going to say. Ole Miss at Kentucky. Kentucky, as everybody remembers, went into Oxford last year, beat Ole Miss on a field goal. Ole Miss is going to be out for blood. They want to kind of pay that back. They want to go up to Lexington, and they want to repay that favor to Kentucky and win up there. They want to kind of do what Kentucky did to them in their own house. Ole Miss currently favored by 9.5. As I said earlier in the show, I really like Austin Simmons. The only issue with Austin Simmons here, this is the same issue that Ole Miss ran into last year when they played Kentucky, and that is turnovers. The biggest thing with them is turning the football over. Austin Simmons has thrown two interceptions last week in their game. He can't do that against Kentucky. He wants to win this football game. Kentucky's going to try to make this game ugly. They're going to try to make it nasty. The FPI actually gives Kentucky a better chance to win this year than they did last year. Kentucky has a 16.4% chance of winning this football game this year. Last year, FPI gave them a 9% chance. Whether you pay attention to ESPN analytics or not, that's where they're at. However, I trust Lane Kiffin's play calling. I like Austin Simmons. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in the league. I'm not a big fan of Zach Calzada. So I'm going to take Ole Miss. I'm going to take Ole Miss to cover. I think Ole Miss really has a lot on their mind going into this game. I think they're coming for blood. I think they're going to hit Kentucky in the mouth. And I think you're going to see about a 10-point win to 13-point win. Somewhere in that neighborhood is what I'm feeling like is what we're going to see out of that football game. Moving on, we have Michigan and Oklahoma. Big contest of the weekend, and this is a game that I really am looking forward to watching because this is the beautiful thing about college football. And whether or not you like the NIL thing or the transfer portal thing in today's day and age, here's what it creates. It creates the fact that you have a team that wasn't really good last year, two teams that really weren't really good last year, and now they're both in a situation where they could win this football game and be knocking on the door of a top 10 ranking. Michigan beats Oklahoma. I feel like they're close to being in the top 10. Oklahoma beats Michigan. Same thing. And both of these teams have aside from Michigan winning the national championship 2 years ago, last year really not a scary team. Had virtually no passing offense, just bleh. Here they are now with Bryce Underwood. Now we get to see a little bit different Michigan this year as opposed to last year. And I really like Bryce Underwood. I think, you talk about a great quarterback, just a great quarterback, physical specimen, has a cannon for an arm, all the intangibles, you name it. Like I said, he is what the media is telling you that Arch Manning is. That's Bryce Underwood. Great quarterback duel here with John Mateer versus Bryce Underwood. John Mateer, one of those guys that, transferred into Oklahoma, very sought-after transfer, just a gunslinger, I guess is the best way to describe him. Just going to go out there, going to sling the rock. So this game, to me, could go one of two ways. I feel like if Michigan can run the football on Oklahoma, I feel like they're going to try to play keep away from John Mateer, and it would be in their best interest to do so. I feel like that's going to be one recipe you could see from Michigan is give the ball to Haynes, maybe run it with Underwood a little bit, something like that, just to keep the clock running and keep Oklahoma on the sideline. You don't want to get, regardless of how good I think Bryce Underwood is, I don't think you want to get into a shootout with John Mateer in this Oklahoma offense because they're going to put up points fast. So I don't think you want to try to get your freshman quarterback into a shootout with Oklahoma. I think the best thing to do is what you don't want to do with Bryce Underwood is you don't want to do what we saw Steve Sarkisian and Ryan Day do with their quarterbacks last Saturday. We don't want to see you water down the playbook and water down the play calling to the fact where you kind of handcuff your talented quarterback. I know he's a freshman. I know he doesn't fully understand the offense. Maybe he doesn't, maybe he does. But either way, I feel like Michigan's going to have to reach into the bag a little bit more than, they would otherwise because it is a matchup against Oklahoma. Given that, on the road in Norman, tough place to play, I think Michigan is a really good football team. I think Bryce Underwood is a really good talent. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in college, may even potentially, before his career's over, make a push for a Heisman Trophy. However, the game in Norman is going to be my deciding factor here. I've got Oklahoma winning this football game. Oklahoma currently favored by 5.5. I think this game's going to be tight. So give me Oklahoma by a field goal. Let's say 27-24. Oklahoma Sooners win against the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan doesn't have anything to hang their heads about if they lose that football game because of the fact, hey, you still got a freak at quarterback and you still got a lot of games to be played. And the defending national champions, you've got them later in the year and they haven't been able to beat you here as of late. So let's keep that train rolling. So this weekend, like I said earlier in the show, not a whole lot going on. I mean, you've got some matchups like, you've got Georgia and Austin Peay, you've got Troy and Clemson, you've got East Texas A&M, which I didn't even know was a team that existed, playing Florida State. You've got Baylor SMU, which will be a decent, I think, kind of decent football game if you want to watch that one on Saturday at noon. Kennesaw State's playing Indiana, so another just snoozer. I'm going to call this Snooze Fest weekend 2025. Snooze Fest 2025. It's like, the music festivals where they say something palooza. Snooze-a-palooza 2025 college football edition. That's what this weekend's going to be. Not a lot of big games, but then the season will take a drastic turn after this week. We're starting to get into some, better matchups. And I didn't think I was going to do a very long show because of the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of substance to talk about, except for the fact of the new AP poll rankings, go through that with y'all, and then also go through this weekend's matchups. So once again, thank y'all for tuning in. Appreciate the listens. Appreciate everybody tuning in, recommending the podcast to your friends. I thank the haters too, man. I've got some hate. I've got some good messages over the last week about people thinking my picks are terrible, my pick was wrong, my opinion's wrong. And to that point, I'll say it like I said again earlier in the show. Get your own show. It's free to do. I'll even teach you how to do it if you want. If you want to get on here and you want to get you a mic and you want to shout your raggedy opinions out to everybody, if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. Get your own show and I'll help you set it up and we'll do it. Maybe I'll even have you as a guest on here. Speaking of that, I'm trying to get some guests on the show. Be sure if you know somebody that could potentially be on the show, if you know a college football athlete, college football coach, anybody like that, going to like to have them on the show, just tell them to reach out to me. They can find me on Facebook, After the Whistle with Colby Allen. You can find me on Twitter at ATWCFB. Also, if you want to, it is, what is my email? That's a good question because I don't even manage my email. I have a wife for that. Let's see. I believe it's afterthewhistlecfb@gmail.com. That's it. So if you want to email me, afterthewhistlecfb@gmail.com. Look me up, like I said, on social media. Give me a follow. Be sure, if you haven't already, the show on Spotify. Be sure to like it. Follow the Spotify show. It's also available on Apple Podcasts. If you use Apple Podcasts as well, it's available on there. Give me a rating, a comment, whatever you want to do. I appreciate it. Thank y'all once again for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next week, and we'll wrap up week 2's action. Thanks.